A simple woman mocked on stage, but her incredible piano talent shocks the audience. Welcome to Stories TH. In today's video, we delve into the transformative power of empathy. It's not just about understanding others, it's about feeling with them and connecting on a deeper level. Empathy allows us to build stronger, more compassionate relationships and create a better world for everyone. If this resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories TH for more insightful videos that will inspire and uplift you. Emily Johnson had walked those halls for years, unseen by nearly everyone who passed her. She was just the custodian in a beige uniform, moving quietly between the polished marble floors of the Preston Music Conservatory. Her shoes squeaked faintly with each step, a sound long ignored by the conservatory's students and staff. Most never looked up, their eyes trained on prestigious posters and grand performances, never considering the life behind the woman who wiped the glass and emptied their trash. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to learn, was that Emily had once been more than the silent figure pushing a mop. She had been a gifted pianist with a scholarship to Juilliard, a rising star with hands trained to dance across the keys, not scrub them. Life, however, had asked something else of her. When her grandmother herself, a celebrated symphony pianist, fell gravely ill, Emily stepped away from that bright future to provide the care no one else could. Dreams were exchanged for responsibility. Spotlights were replaced by silence. And yet, through all those years of wiping down stair railings and straightening recital chairs, the music never truly left her. It lingered in her fingers, in her memory, in the rhythm of her daily work. The gala night came unexpectedly. A famed donor event, polished to perfection, where only the elite were supposed to perform. When the scheduled pianist fell ill with food poisoning just an hour before showtime, panic rippled through the faculty. Olivia, the star performer, was suddenly gone. In desperation, a kind teaching assistant suggested someone he'd heard playing after hours. Someone brilliant, someone unexpected, someone who mopped the floors. Laughter followed. Jokes were whispered. Could the janitor really save the show? They didn't think so, but they decided to use her anyway, framing it as a community outreach moment, a feel-good novelty to help put on stage for entertainment. Emily stood on that stage not as a polished performer, but as herself. She was still wearing her work uniform, the same beige top with a name tag that had made her invisible for so long. The audience whispered and chuckled. The lights were harsh. The moment felt cruel. Yet, when her fingers touched the keys of the Grand Steinway, everything changed. From the very first note of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, the room fell silent. Emily didn't just play the piece, she lived it. Every note carried the weight of years sacrificed in service of someone she loved, the quiet grief of deferred dreams, and the undimmed light of a gift that had never truly faded. Her hands moved with grace and fire, delivering a performance so masterful, so emotionally rich, that seasoned critics in the audience blinked away tears. The same crowd that had braced for failure now found themselves on their feet, offering a standing ovation that echoed off the marble columns. The woman they had mocked had become unforgettable. When the last note faded, the applause erupted, not polite, but thunderous. It wasn't just talent they had witnessed, but resilience, dignity, a kind of excellence that came not from conservatories or competition trophies, but from love, sacrifice, and enduring grace. When Emily explained how she had given up Juilliard to care for her grandmother, the room fell still again, not out of pity, but deep respect. Her grandmother had once told her, "Music isn't about who you are to the world, it's about who you are when the world falls away." And in that moment, Emily became the truest version of herself. Not a janitor, not a forgotten talent, but a woman whose music spoke louder than any title ever could. The story didn't end with applause. 3 months later, Emily was no longer cleaning the halls, she was teaching in them. Hired by a foundation that recognized her talent, she now led a music program for underprivileged youth, giving students who felt invisible a voice. And perhaps most importantly, she played again not for fame, but for the joy of it. For herself, for her students, for the memory of a grandmother whose lessons had outlived even her own breath. Emily's journey reminds us all, greatness doesn't always wear a tuxedo or speak with prestige. Sometimes it wears sneakers and a name tag. Sometimes it waits quietly behind the scenes until the world is finally ready to listen. Sarah Morgan had never cared much for appearances. At 34, she preferred simple clothes, gray sweatpants, a plain t-shirt, and an easy ponytail over designer dresses or flashy jewelry. Despite being married to Daniel Morgan, a billionaire investment mogul known for his sharp suits and sharper mind, Sarah had always lived modestly, pouring her energy into the Morgan Educational Foundation, which she built from the ground up to serve children in underfunded schools. That morning, when she walked into the marble lobby of Atlantic National Bank, she wasn't looking for attention. She just wanted to open a new account to support a literacy program for kids who had never owned a single book. But her appearance didn't match the bank's expectations. She wasn't dressed in heels or wrapped in luxury. So they saw her not as a philanthropist, but as a nobody. The customer service manager, Rebecca Palmer, greeted her with a tight smile and cold eyes, her words laced with condescension from the start. Sarah politely explained her reason for coming, a $250,000 deposit for the new program. But Rebecca didn't even touch the check. Instead, she questioned Sarah's legitimacy. Her clothes, her lack of a current account, even her choice to come in person were all treated like red flags. People who make deposits like this don't show up looking like they've just come from the gym, Rebecca sneered, loud enough for other customers to hear. Whispers started. Eyes turned. A few snickered. The humiliation cut deep, but Sarah stood firm, her voice soft yet steady. Then Rebecca raised her finger and said she might need to call security. That was when Daniel, who had been on a call nearby, saw what was happening. Calmly but deliberately, he walked over and placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Is there a problem with my wife?" he asked. The room froze. Rebecca's smugness vanished. Her eyes darted between Sarah's ponytail and Daniel's platinum watch, and the pieces began to fall into place. Daniel Morgan, owner of Morgan Capital, one of the bank's most valuable clients, was standing beside the woman she had just tried to escort out. Her face turned pale. The shift in power was immediate and undeniable. What followed wasn't just an apology. It was a reckoning. The bank's president, Walter Thompson, rushed downstairs when he heard Daniel's name. As Daniel calmly recounted the incident, Walter's expression darkened. It wasn't just that Rebecca had misjudged Sarah, it was that this incident exposed a deeper problem in the institution itself. Judging people's worth based on their appearance, their clothes, their status. But Sarah, with her quiet dignity, didn't demand an apology. Instead, she asked for change. She wanted the bank to treat every customer with respect, not just those in suits. She suggested bias training, new policies, and even a partnership with her foundation to serve underserved communities. Walter listened, and he acted. Rebecca was removed from her position. Thomas, a young associate who had treated Sarah with kindness, was promoted to lead a new community banking initiative. Sarah's foundation helped design programs for families that banks had long ignored. The ripple effect spread far beyond that day. 6 months later, Sarah stood before an audience of educators and bankers, her simple elegance unchanged. The foundation had grown. The bank had transformed. And even Rebecca, now a mother learning how to help her own son with reading difficulties, had joined one of Sarah's parent workshops. The very woman who had once dismissed her now sat in the audience, learning, changing. That moment in the bank hadn't just exposed cruelty, it planted the seed for transformation. Sarah's story reminded everyone watching that day, and many more who would read about it, that dignity is not worn on your sleeve, and kindness doesn't come with a price tag. The most powerful wealth, she showed, lies not in our bank accounts, but in how we treat people, especially when we think they have nothing to offer us in return. And for those who had underestimated her, the lesson was unforgettable. Because sometimes the richest person in the room is the one in sneakers, holding a check that could change thousands of lives and doing it without asking for anything but decency in return. Abigail Turner had long believed her days of music were behind her. At 34, Her life in Oakdale, Connecticut, revolved around making lunches for her kids, folding laundry, and humming softly while she worked. It had been nearly 15 years since she last stepped onto a stage, since her name was printed in a concert program. Back then, she had been a rising star at Westmore Academy of Music, praised for her soprano range and emotional depth, destined for grand concert halls. But when her father suffered a massive stroke, she traded curtain calls for caregiving without hesitation. Over time, life moved on. She married Daniel, raised 2 children, and tucked away her sheet music in a trunk in the attic. But music never really left her. It lingered in lullabies, in backyard gardens, in quiet moments no one else noticed. Then one day, an envelope arrived from Westmore, inviting her to their 25th anniversary gala. At first, she dismissed it. She hadn't graduated. She wasn't famous. But Daniel gently reminded her maybe it wasn't about them. Maybe it was about making peace with a part of herself she had quietly mourned. So she accepted. On the night of the gala, she wore the only formal dress she owned, beige and understated, her hair unstyled, her makeup minimal. She walked into the glittering venue, surrounded by people in gowns and tuxedos, their conversations laced with names like Carnegie and Vienna. It wasn't long before she was recognized not for her achievements, but for having walked away. Lawrence Blackwood, once her fiercest rival and now a celebrated conductor, spotted her from across the room. He smiled, but not with warmth. "Abigail Turner," he said, raising a glass. "What have you been doing with all that potential?" The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they carried the weight of judgment she had long internalized. Others joined in, asking pointed questions cloaked in politeness. Did she miss it? Had she ever tried to come back? And finally, on stage, Lawrence delivered the cruelest blow. He called her out by name and invited her to sing, masking ridicule as a gesture of honor. Abby could have declined. She had every reason to. But instead, she stood, walked to the stage, and requested "O mio babino caro." The audience snickered. Even Lawrence smirked. But when she opened her mouth, the hall fell silent. Her voice wasn't just technically sound, it was transcendent. Years of love, sacrifice, and quiet longing poured through every note. It was as if time paused. Applause erupted when she finished, not polite clapping, but a standing ovation from seasoned critics, musicians, and strangers alike. People who had ignored her minutes earlier now watched with awe. Some cried. Others looked stunned. Even Lawrence sat in silence, his expression unreadable. In that moment, Abby realized something profound. She had never needed their approval. She hadn't sung to prove herself. She sang because music had always been a part of her, even when she wasn't on stage. Later, she was approached by music foundations, by board members, by people who now recognized her not as a has-been, but as a rare, genuine talent. One organization even asked her to teach, to help children from underprivileged backgrounds find their voice. She didn't need to think long. 2 months later, she opened Turner Vocal Studio, a modest but joy-filled space where she taught both kids and adults. Her studio wasn't about fame or awards. It was about connection, healing, rediscovery. Her daughter, Emily, began learning piano. Her students didn't care that she hadn't graced European opera houses. They only knew she made them feel seen, heard, and capable. And in sharing music again, not to impress, but to uplift, Abby found something better than applause. Purpose. The same voice once stifled by fear and duty had returned, stronger and deeper, enriched by life itself. And, as she told her students each week, it's not too late to sing your song. You just have to be willing to listen for it. In a world that often measures success by spotlights and stages, Abby's story gently reminds us that the most beautiful performances often begin after the curtain was thought to have closed, and sometimes the most powerful notes come after the longest silence. It began like any ordinary morning at the Atlantic National Bank, polished marble floors gleaming under the early light, men in tailored suits nodding at each other as they passed, women in crisp blouses tapping away at keyboards, and a steady hum of quiet wealth and order. When Sarah Morgan walked in, dressed in gray sweatpants and a well-worn t-shirt. Most people didn't even notice her. Those who did quickly assumed she didn't belong. She carried a modest file folder and walked with the calm confidence of someone who didn't need attention to feel important. Her husband, Daniel Morgan, a sharply dressed man with silvering hair and a reputation as one of the nation's top investment executives, paused just inside the door. "You sure you want to handle this alone?" he asked. Sarah smiled and nodded. "We agreed this is my foundation's account. I want to do it myself." With a parting kiss and a warm glance, Daniel stepped away to take a business call, and Sarah made her way to the customer service desk. That's when the mood shifted. Rebecca Palmer, the bank's customer service manager, looked up from her screen and, upon seeing Sarah's attire, barely concealed her skepticism. She spoke with tight-lipped formality, the kind reserved for people who appear out of place. When Sarah explained she was there to open a new account for the Morgan Educational Foundation backed by a $250,000 check, Rebecca's eyebrows arched in disbelief. The judgment didn't stop there. As Sarah calmly presented every piece of documentation, Rebecca's tone turned sharper, louder, drawing curious looks from nearby customers. "People making deposits this large usually don't come in looking like they've just come from the gym," she said with a thin smile. And when Sarah, maintaining grace despite the public humiliation, asked if her paperwork was in order, Rebecca pointed at her with a warning. "Take your business elsewhere, or I'll call security." Sarah's cheeks flushed, not out of shame, but from the sting of being dismissed based on appearance. In a room she had every right to be in. Across the lobby, Daniel ended his call and saw the exchange unfolding. What he witnessed wasn't just unprofessional, it was personal. His wife, the woman who had built an education foundation from scratch and helped thousands of underprivileged kids learn to read, was being treated like a criminal for not wearing pearls or a pantsuit. With quiet intensity, Daniel walked over. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Rebecca, annoyed by the interruption, barely glanced at him before saying, "Sir, I'm handling a situation with this person." But when Daniel gently placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder and said, "This person is my wife," the bank fell silent. Recognition dawned. Faces turned. Rebecca's expression crumbled as the truth took root. She had not only misjudged a valued customer, but she had insulted the wife of the bank's most prominent client. The president of the bank, Walter Thompson, quickly emerged from his office, flustered and pale. Daniel, his voice steady, laid out the facts. He had banked there for over 15 years, had referred dozens of clients, and had more than $300 million in personal and business accounts held with them. But this wasn't about money, he said. It was about respect. Sarah stepped forward. "What happens when someone like me walks in, but doesn't have a husband with status and influence? What happens to the next person who doesn't look the part?" Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't demanding an apology for herself. She was advocating for every person who had ever been judged by their clothes instead of their character. That afternoon, the bank changed. Rebecca was removed from her role. Sarah proposed an action plan, bias training, a review of policies, and a partnership with her foundation to provide banking access to underserved communities. And when a young associate named Thomas stepped forward to help Sarah with her account, he quietly added, "Your foundation helped my sister last year. She used to cry over books. Now she's reading them on her own." That single sentence transformed everything from theory into truth. Months later, Sarah stood before a packed room of educators and bankers, speaking not as a victim of prejudice, but as a champion of dignity. The bank had adopted her proposals and created a new program helping nonprofits navigate financial systems. And sitting in the crowd was Rebecca, not proud, but changed, humbled, even grateful, because one woman in sweatpants reminded a room full of professionals that wealth isn't about appearance, it's about impact. And respect, like trust, should be extended long before status is confirmed. In a world too quick to judge, Sarah Morgan left behind a message louder than any bank vault could contain. True worth isn't worn, it's lived. Emily Johnson never intended to be the center of attention, especially not in a room filled with chandeliers, donors in evening gowns, and the city's most respected musicians, but that's exactly where she found herself one unforgettable night. at Preston Music Conservatory. For years, she had quietly cleaned the marble floors and dusted the trophy cases, moving like a shadow among students and staff who barely acknowledged her existence. To them, she was just the janitor in a faded beige uniform, the one who knew when to disappear before an important meeting or performance. But what they didn't know, what they never even thought to ask, was that Emily had once stood on the edge of a brilliant future in music. Accepted to Juilliard at 18, she had the world at her fingertips until life took a sharp turn. Her grandmother, a retired symphony pianist who raised her, suffered a debilitating stroke the same week she was supposed to start school. Emily gave it all up without hesitation to become a caregiver, and when her grandmother passed, she was left with nothing but medical bills and a silent piano. Still, music never left her. After her night shifts, when the halls emptied and the lights dimmed, she would slip into the practice rooms and play not for applause, but to remember who she once was. That night, the fundraising gala was in full swing when disaster struck. Olivia, the conservatory's featured performer, was hospitalized with food poisoning an hour before showtime. Panic set in. The gala depended on her performance, and without it, they risked losing a major donation. Amid the chaos, a young teaching assistant named Jason, one of the few people who had ever treated Emily with kindness, spoke up. "I've heard someone else play that piece," he said softly. "And she's incredible." All heads turned as he nodded toward Emily, who was quietly polishing a brass railing nearby. Laughter echoed. The janitor? Surely he was joking. But Jason didn't waver. "She plays Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody better than anyone I've heard here." A stunned silence followed, broken only when Emily, now the subject of everyone's gaze, quietly admitted, "I know the piece." Still, no one truly believed she could do it, not Samantha, the prestigious piano instructor who had mocked her earlier, not Victoria, the head of the conservatory who saw her as a liability, not even some of the board members who chuckled as they sized her up like an oddity. But something inside Emily refused to be humiliated. "Not this time." "What happens if I say no?" she asked calmly. Victoria's answer was cold. "Then we'll have to reevaluate your position. Budget cuts, you understand." With no choice but to perform or lose her job, Emily stepped onto the stage, still in her janitor's uniform, under a spotlight that had never once been meant for her. The crowd tittered. Some smirked. Others whispered. But then she began to play, and the room changed. From the first note, her fingers danced with a grace and power that stunned every doubter into silence. Each movement, each crescendo, told a story of love, loss, and resilience. Her performance wasn't just technically flawless, it was alive. The patrons who had moments earlier questioned her place in that room now watched with mouths slightly open, their assumptions unraveling note by note. By the final chord, you could hear a pin drop, and then the ovation. Applause erupted like thunder, people leaping to their feet, shouting bravo through tears. A famed conductor in attendance stepped forward, stunned. "Where did you study?" he asked. "Nowhere formally," she replied. "My grandmother taught me." And then the truth spilled out. Her Juilliard acceptance, her sacrifice, her journey from prodigy to invisible worker. But now no longer invisible. Offers followed. Apologies, too. The same people who once dismissed her began to speak her name with reverence. Emily declined the spotlight, but she accepted something more meaningful. A position leading a new initiative for underprivileged youth, teaching music to those who, like her, had been underestimated and overlooked. 3 months later, she stood before a room of wide-eyed students, no longer in a uniform, but still the same woman, humble, resilient, and deeply human. "Music," she told them, "isn't about what you wear or where you come from. It's about what lives in your heart." And as she played for them, the sound of a new beginning filled the room, pure, unfiltered, and undeniably beautiful. Because Emily Johnson had once been forgotten, but now she would never be unseen again. In life, it's often easy to judge someone by what we see on the surface: a uniform, a title, the kind of shoes they wear, or the car they drive. But stories like Emily's remind us that hidden within ordinary appearances are often extraordinary souls. Many of us, especially as we grow older, have learned the quiet strength it takes to walk through life unnoticed, doing what's right not for applause, but because it needs to be done. Emily's journey is a powerful reminder that dignity isn't bestowed by others, it comes from within. Her story teaches us that it's never too late to reclaim parts of ourselves that we've quietly set aside. Maybe it was a dream once postponed for the sake of family, or a talent buried under the weight of responsibility. But those parts of us never truly vanish. They wait patiently for the right moment to return. In a world often obsessed with youth, status, and perfection, there's a sacred kind of wisdom in aging. We've seen how fleeting those things are. What remains, what truly matters, is character, how we treat others when no one's watching, and how we hold on to hope when the world tries to make us feel invisible. Whether you're 65 or 95, your voice, your gifts, your stories still have purpose. You're not defined by your past titles or present limitations, but by the resilience that brought you this far. And just like Emily at that piano, perhaps there's still a moment ahead for each of us to remind the world and ourselves that beauty and brilliance can shine even brighter with age. Thank you for watching. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest content. Join the Stories TH community today for more inspiring stories and lessons on empathy and compassion.